so good. Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. And if you clicked on this video, it's likely that you are thinking about lowering your G80 M3 or maybe even M4, and you're just kind of doing some research. And I've done different suspension modifications on this car in particular, so I think that I could maybe provide you with some things that I would consider before actually lowering your car, because I've done a couple myself. I actually had a couple people reach out to me on Instagram and kind of ask about the springs and setup I was running, and had questions about how the ride quality was, how the fitment was, all that stuff. But if you're not following me already on Instagram at Tucson_speed, definitely would appreciate a follow. That way you can stay up to date with things I'm doing on a daily basis when it comes to the car, rather than waiting for weekly videos to come out. So jumping right into it, the first thing that I wanted to essentially talk about is going to be the ride quality. Now, I've done two different things. I initially started with the Eibach Pro springs just in the front, and that lowered the front end 20 millimeters, nothing in the rear. What I currently am running on the car is the KW Haas kit. So it's bottomed out all the way in the front, and then we've lowered the back a little bit to kind of make it symmetrical. So it looks pretty good here. I'll give you kind of like a view from the side as well. There's the side view. I think it looks perfect the way that it is now. Obviously, we're sitting on bigger wheels and stuff in front. We'll get into that here in a second. But in terms of ride quality, I would say, especially if you're just going with the Eibach springs in the front of the car, there was zero noticeable difference between stock from the factory, ride quality wise, and those Eibach Pro springs. I'll put up some pictures here to give you an idea of what that looked like compared to how it looks now, and it looks a little bit, I mean, it's definitely lower than it was with the Eibachs on there. But ride quality, no difference on the Eibach Pro springs in the front end. Now, moving over to the KW Haas kit, I really didn't notice too much of a difference either. So it's kind of crazy. It's lower. The ride quality is still really, really good. If you're super picky, there might be like a little noticeable difference here and there. But overall, if you're still running the stock wheels and tires, then going with the KW Haas kit, I think, is probably the best option. That way you have that level of adjustability and be able to dial it in for you specifically. And that's what I appreciate about the KW Haas kit so much. And there's other companies that make height adjustable springs for the car as well. I just went with one that I know performed really well for a lot of other people. The only time that I really started to notice ride quality decreasing a little bit is when we went up to 20-inch wheels in the front of the car. So as this car comes stock, we have 19s in the front, 20s in the back. I upgraded and went with a 20 all the way around, so 20 squared setup. I think it looks a lot better, but it's a rougher ride because you have that bigger wheel in the front. So that's something to keep in mind. All right, number two, the next thing that I would recommend considering is ground clearance. Now, obviously, when you lower a car, the distance between the front bumper or the skid plates on the bottom and the ground is reduced, right? So obviously there's going to be some times where you're going to rub. I think if this is a daily driver, then that's something to take into account too. If you are planning on daily driving the car and you don't have to worry about a bunch of speed bumps or being able to fit it in your driveway, and you have a steep incline in your driveway, then I think that the KW Haas kit, the way that it's set up now, might be perfect for somebody like you. However, if you're living in a city where there's a lot of speed bumps, or maybe it's a pain to get your car in the garage, and that's something I would think about as well. For me, I do face a lot of those things, and my driveway is pretty steep, and I rub a little bit if I go too fast. I can kind of angle myself in and be able to get in there without rubbing, but that is something that you should be aware of going into thinking about lowering your vehicle. So that's rubbing in terms of ground clearance on the bottom of the car. Something else to think about is how you're going to be rubbing in the inner fender line. Now, I think this is something that's more based on if you're running spacers on your car, which I imagine a lot of people are, because the way the stance is from factory, it's not great. And even with these wheels, you can kind of see it. I'm still running 7mm spacers on here just to give it out, just to push it out just a little bit. If I'm cranking the wheel all the way to the left and I'm going in reverse, it's hitting these like louvers in here on the inner fender liner. I know that a company, I believe IND makes a replacement fender liner. You can go and replace it, and it makes it so that it won't rub. However, those are like $500 or some crazy number. In my opinion, it's not worth it. Or you could get in there and kind of DIY it, just trim out that little piece of plastic that it rubs on. And what I'll probably end up doing is when I go to replace, so I'm gonna be replacing the white DRLs to yellow here pretty soon. And when I do that, I have to take that fender liner out anyways. I'm probably gonna go ahead and trim that up a little bit, try to make it look nice. But in terms of rubbing, that is the only place that I've gotten rubbing on the inner fender liner. Anywhere else, it doesn't rub or anything like that. So the next thing I want to talk about is price. And what I would recommend anybody do is seriously consider going with just doing the KW Haas kit or any height adjustable spring kit rather than just going with the Eibach front springs. I think that the level of adjustability serves a greater purpose than just trying to lower the car. You can really dial things in to the way that you like it. So in hindsight, if I were to do this all again, I probably would have just bought the KW Haas kit right from the jump, so that way I didn't waste money on the Eibach springs. Now granted, the Eibach springs are only a couple $100. However, since I bought those and then now I've bought the height adjustable springs, that kind of factors into the overall cost. In terms of KW Haas kit, I think I paid $700-800 from R44 Performance. Again, the Eibach front springs are just a couple $100, so they're super cheap and effective if that's the route that you want to go. However, I think it's well worth the extra cost to go ahead and get it dialed in front and back. Now, not only are you paying for the price of the springs, but you're also paying for installation. I think I paid $400 to have the front springs put in, the Eibach front springs put in. When I went to get the KW Haas kit installed, and I can show you here, looks like we paid $700 for the KW Haas kit to be installed on the car. So that factors into everything. So let's just call it $1,600 out the door, purchasing the springs and then also getting them installed too. So those are all costs that you need to factor into the overall equation. Another cost that you probably hadn't thought about that you need to factor in is getting an alignment done. So after you do any kind of suspension work to the car, you need to get the car aligned. You're looking at about $200-250, at least here in Arizona, close to $2,000 after everything is said and done. Now, if you can find a shop that will do it cheaper, then so be it, but that's just what I happen to pay to have the car lowered and get it dialed into where it's at now. And the final and last thing, I think it's important to consider where you live. If you're daily driving a car and you live somewhere where it's snowing in the winter, obviously driving a lowered car around when it's snowing out could potentially be a problem. So that's all something to think about. I'm here in Arizona, so year round it's pretty good. Like, sure, it gets a little cool in the winter, but we don't have snow or anything like that. Granted, we do have a lot of rocks and dust and stuff like that, but that doesn't really come into play with the suspension and how the car is lowered. That's just more so for the upkeep on the paint, which, by the way, I'm gonna make a video kind of going over if I think buying a car with frozen or matte paint is worth it, but it's been a journey to maintain this paint so far. That being said, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to today's video. If you got any value out of today's video and you want to see more content like this, just based off of my experience with the car and things that I've done with it, then definitely consider subscribing to the channel. We have a lot of stuff on the way to the channel, actually something very, very soon. So if you don't already follow me on Instagram, then definitely check that out because you'll kind of see a sneak peek of what we have coming to the channel very, very soon. I'm super excited. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next one.